So, what would you do if you were on a bus or a train and then suddenly it stops after some announcement in a language you don't understand and everyone starts to calm down? Like, what would you do? And that was Nkechi. Like, literally, that happened to her. I mean, I would. I don't know what I would do, actually, to be honest. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind for me is I would be a bit scared or worried, like what's going on, especially if you just move to a new country that doesn't really speak English as your official language. I mean, people speak English there, So let me let Kitchi tell you the story herself. Like, it has happened to her before.
You're on the metro going to work, and suddenly there's an announcement in Dutch, and people start exiting. It's just like, okay, what did they say?
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Newcomers Podcast, where I talk to immigrants like myself about what it feels like settling into a new country. Today I have with me Nkechi, who's one of those Nigerians who moved to Netherlands for work. She's been there for like 2 years now. How have you been? How does it feel? Tell me about that.
Hi, hoi, as we say in Dutch. Oh, does it feels good. It feels different, and I've also been looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, me
So
too.
for us to jump right in and dig in.
Yeah. So, and I'll just kind of start off with like I'm going straight into deep end here because I know you moved here. You moved there with two kids, and your husband works in another country. So, what has been your most overwhelming moment in all this past 23 months in the
In the
Netherlands?
Netherlands. Yeah, I don't think there is a moment like
Okay.
that is overwhelming, but there are days where you have this like really big presentation to like the executive team and life and all that. And in Nigeria, you would get up on that day and just be like, I'm getting up early, I'm going out of the house. There's not a day that goes by where, except when my husband is around, which is maybe every fortnight or thereabout. It doesn't matter what kind of day I'm going to have at work. The humility that I have to wake up every morning and pack school lunch, right? Even if I have to do it at 5 a.m., is just always that realization that this is a very different life. So that's one thing, and it's also the I have to come home and make dinner, right? It's never in my career has that ever been a factor that if something comes up at work at like 4:30 or 5 o'clock, my brain has to process, oh my, what are the kids? How am I going to, you know, get dinner, food on the table? So I think that for me, that's always sort of the overwhelm that regardless of everything going on in work and life, the full time mommy
Mm.
is never something that I ever had to do. And so you know how my life was in Nigeria, right? I had a
Yeah.
full army of a support system, a driver of 10 years who had been there since I was pregnant for like my kids, a living nanny of 3 years. My mom lived with me. So those were never things that I had to think about. There were days when you got up and it was just work mode, right? Today is the day you think about, but the humility that two children are solely dependent on me for their mom. It's yeah, it has a complexity that is humbling.
Mm. How do you straddle that balance though? Because I know like it's not said enough, but I get that point where you talk about where you can just switch on work mode. But then for someone who comes from a place where you can switch on work mode without thinking about it, like how do you straddle the balance between, oh yeah, I'm working, but Temilade needs to go for piano class this evening, so I need to like how do you keep that thing going on in your head?
Yeah, I'm very thankful that when the kids came, they were 8 and 11, and then my older son turned 12. Thankfully, in the Netherlands, at 12, they start to recognize you as like independent. So a 12-year-old can do certain things that has helped me. So yes, they have tennis and music and all of these activities, but they're typically able to cycle and do those things by themselves without me necessarily being there. So the first few months until he was legally able to do that, that was when I really felt, the stress, because it was the responsibility of I had to, go and pick them from certain activities and accompany them to certain places. So yeah, nobody really prepares you for that. No one really, tells you about that. And even when they tell you, it's almost always like, no, people have done it, we'll do it. Yeah. So the first few months until Demi was able to do those things, at least legally allowed to do those things. Yeah, it was tough. It
Mm,
was really tough. I'm thankful that I had a few months. So when I moved alone for the first 3 4 months, and I remain thankful that I had that before the kids came. So I moved in August, started work September 1st, and then the kids only came at Christmas. I'm very thankful that I had that moment because it meant that by the time they came at Christmas and life happened, like in January after the holidays and all that, I was a little bit settled at work.
mm,
And so if I had to, I have to, rush to pick my kids from school or have to do that, I had had 4 months where I was solely 100% giving everything to work. So even though I felt like at certain moments, like, this is a bit much. The fact that I had, laid a good foundation the first few months, I think that was helpful.
mm. I really like that point you make about well, 2 points actually. I like the one you where you say no one really prepares you for it. Everyone just says, and it's so funny how it happens. Just says, oh yeah, you can do it, you can do it. And you get in there and you're like, oh, can I really do this? And
Yeah.
then the point about, moving early before the kids, and just allows you to just get into some sort of groove because uprooting your whole life and starting all over again is, I feel like, is the scariest thing I've done so far in my life, like, to be honest.
No,
you
I
know.
always say it's single-handedly the most difficult experience that I've had in my adult life. It's not even like I feel like I say it 100% that this is the most difficult adult experience that I've had. I'm thankful that by the time the kids came, I knew I found the African store. Their room was set up. I knew the bus routes. I knew how to get to school. I knew certain things, so I could be there for them. A little less of a newcomer, and
Mm,
that helped, that I knew where their school was. They came to a set house and a ready house, because when I came I was in temporary housing.
mm,
So I was thankful I was able to find school, find housing, find all of those things before they came. I mean, I wasn't completely settled, but I think that helped a little bit. So I remain thankful that my support system in Nigeria allowed me to do that.
mm.
Yeah.
Now you say something about you aren't fully settled. Do you think that you're fully settled now? Because let me not bias you with what I think, but yeah, what do you think you're fully settled now?
The thing is, every time that I feel like, okay, I'm in my stride, something will always happen that reminds you, that you're an immigrant. And for anybody who doesn't know, English is not the official language in the Netherlands. So every official communication that comes from the government, whether it's about anything, your letters all come fully 100% in Dutch. So you will always get this letter that you open it. You know it's from the government because you see Clemente, but then you open it and it's just like, okay, Google Translate to read it. And depending on who it's from, sometimes I find myself, I'm just like, okay, I've used Google Translate, but just in case, I'm going to take it. Oh, apologies for that. I'm going to move
No,
my
that's
phone.
okay.
I'm going to take the letter to work and sit with my Dutch colleague and be like, I know Google Translate said this, but just in case, it's government, it's official, it's from the tax authorities or something. So there's always that reminds you that, okay, you're not fully, I mean, my Dutch, I always say my Dutch is perfect in the supermarket. So I understand everything, all the labels. That's also another thing. The labels of everything in the store is in Dutch. So every time that I need to buy something that is maybe not something that I'm used to buying, you will still find yourself in that moment where just like, okay, let me double check that this is what it is. So every once in a while, I still find myself Google translating in the store, or you're on the metro going to work and suddenly there's an announcement in Dutch and people start exiting. It's just like, okay, what did they say? So there's always those moments, and I feel like unless my Dutch is like super 100% perfect and I can now navigate without needing that, there's for me it's always that reminder that okay, you're never really settled there.
Yeah, what I was going to say, why this I didn't want biases because I've spoken to a lot of immigrants, and the thing I keep hearing is that I mean I've spoken to people who have lived out of Nigeria or out of their home country for like 15, 20 years, and you keep hearing from a lot of them. They say you never really settle. You're always in between somehow. Like if something happens and you remember that, oh, I haven't fully understood the culture or the
Yeah.
nuances or something, you know. But staying a bit on the language thing you talked about. So there's this thing
Mm-hmm.
I call it the milk moment. So I was interviewing a lady, one of the ladies on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, and she said when she moved to Canada, when she went to buy milk, she got really overwhelmed. Like so I call it the milk moment. And I just wonder how often that happens to people and if there are other moments like that. She's like she goes into the milk store and she's like,
I
or
just want
goes to
milk.
Walmart and she's like, what
I
which
just
should
want milk.
I just want milk. Like I just want milk. That's all I want. Like which should I buy? Like oh, there's flavored milk. There's 3.25%. There's 2%. There's 1%. There's
Half and
skim milk.
half.
Like I just want milk. I just want milk for my kid. Like which should I buy?
Yeah. Yeah, for me it wasn't milk. Thankfully there is still a lot of my kids still drink the powdered milk from the can, right, into their cereal. So for me it wasn't milk, it was meat. It was meat. It was meat for me. That it was a meat moment. It was like I just want beef, you know? And it was like first of all, there's so many different types, right? Which again, if you think about it in Nigeria, is like maybe you want the back, you want the thigh, you want, what part of it. But added the complexity that it's not in English, it's like runvels, and you're like, okay, which one is which? And then you cook it, and it's just like it doesn't really taste like beef. So thankfully now I realize that I have to go to the butchery. For me,
Mm,
it's when I go to the Surinamese butchery and all that, where I find that that's when I feel like, okay, this is a little bit close to the beef or chicken that I like. But yeah, and I was not quite prepared for the supermarket moment in general. I have to tell you that that was like my biggest, and this was maybe my second or third day in the Netherlands because I arrived into temporary housing, and I had colleagues who were gracious enough on the first day to come and give me groceries and stuff. So I didn't really find myself going to the store by myself until I think maybe day two or three. And I went into the store. And again, this is something that as a newcomer, you get all the things that everybody says, oh, everyone in the Netherlands speaks English, da 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 da. So I was kind of prepared that okay, nobody prepared me that all the labels of everything would be in Dutch. It was like, okay, I want. So for me, I was trying to cook. So I was like, okay, let me
yeah.
go and buy like curry, thyme, ginger, those kind of little seasoning. Because you bring crayfish and all those other things from Nigeria, right?
Yeah.
But you need regular things. And it was like, okay, I want ginger, like powdered ginger and garlic, and just like you see the spice aisle, and everything is
But
like, and
that's
that's a
it's just a spice aisle to you at that point in time.
yeah, but all the labels, it was like, and some things are intuitive, right? So I think I quickly figured out like time, because time is like TIJM, right? Time. But then it was like, okay, garlic.
Yeah, that's what I meant. I meant that you know how with spice aisles when they once they grind them into fine
Yeah,
powder, it's all just bottles
colors.
now. Yeah, it's just
Exactly.
colors. Like
I was like, okay. which one is ginger, which one is garlic. Yeah. And then it's maybe, it's like layers of them, so you're like Google translating like side by side. And I was like, shopping was overwhelming for me instantaneously. Every time I thought about going to the store, it was overwhelming. And then I found myself sticking to one store where I
Mm,
knew one aisle. Like, this is the aisle and this was the place. Every time I had to go to a different one, like when I moved from temporary housing into like my first apartment, going to a new store was overwhelming because I had to figure out the aisles, I had to figure out where they stack their things. So I started sticking to one place of shopping. And even till this day, it's difficult for me when people say, "Oh, let's just go into this one." I'm like, "No, I'm going to go to the one near my house because
mm,
I don't want to go in and start trying to figure out where
mm.
what is." So yeah, it's been interesting. I think for me, it wasn't milk; it was just like the entire supermarket, sausage, everything was like 20. There's always like so many different options, and that's because there's smoke, there's grill, there's this, there's that, but you have to figure out what those words mean in Dutch and what is the difference. So it wasn't just milk. I think it was just everything, all the labels all being in Dutch. That was overwhelming for me.
Yeah. Now, staying on, since you're talking about a bit of overwhelm and cultural shocks and stuff, like aside from these one, like what do you think? What other things like hit you? Like like oh damn, like I don't understand this. That sort of thing.
Yeah, I think it's just that the system is designed for traditional. It's for people who speak Dutch. So whether you're on the bus or the metro, you're going somewhere, there's suddenly an announcement. It's like, I don't know what they just said. Should we get off? What does that mean? And there are times where you do see that maybe they just suddenly stop and people start exiting, like I said. Then it's just like you have to ask someone, okay, what's going to be like, oh, there's something on the train track. So the train is not going further than here. It's like, okay. It would have been nice for me to know that so I could have gotten off maybe two stops before and switched. Yeah. So there's always those kind of moments, but I think what I've now realized is also just ask, because at first it was always that, okay, I don't know, so I'm gonna just figure it out. As soon
Mm,
as I hear an announcement now, I'm just like, oh, ik spreek geen Netherlands, I don't speak Dutch, what did they say? And typically people are always able to help you. So I think also it took a lot for me to get comfortable with saying I don't speak Dutch, but also on the other side, saying to myself, okay, you can't continue to say you don't speak Dutch. You need to
mm,
understand some basic keywords and things. And I feel like that's where having my kids who do 3 hours, they're in an international school, but they do 3 hours of Dutch every week. So of course from them I learned numbers from them. So just knowing like 1 to 100, right? Because that helps you with like if you hear 200 and something or 100 and something, I at least know what that means. Understanding the fundamentals of like time and just picking up little words here and there so that if I hear an announcement, I can understand two or three things and figure out, okay, this means stop, this means go, this means this, and just get the general gist of what was going on. So I think also for me, it was number one, ask. Number two, if you want to stop feeling like this, then you need to make an effort to understand a little bit, get the general gist of what is going on. So not feeling shy because I'm like, okay, I could be a tourist, you know what I mean?
mhm,
So
mhm.
that's okay to ask. So yeah, for me, that's being comfortable with asking, but also making an effort to understand certain things. And I think that feeling of overwhelm in the supermarket, or just like, look, Nkechi, you have to learn everything that you need in your house. You have to know the Dutch words for all of those things because this is something that you do every week, right? You see the size of our fridges and freezers. It's not like Nigeria where I can shop every 6 weeks or 4 weeks. I have to go to the store every week. So it's like you can't be overwhelmed all the time. So I took control of my grocery situation, that every single thing that I need in my house, I know exactly what it means in Dutch. such that I can go into any supermarket. So I think there's a little bit of overcoming that shyness to ask, but also making an effort to make yourself a little bit more comfortable. So that's where I am. That's the phase that I'm at. Interested. When my colleague is translating a letter, I ask some key questions, maybe the words I struggle with the most. What does this mean? That kind of thing. And hopefully I should get to the point where I don't need too much help with. But it's just when it's an official letter, just like just in case.
Yeah,
Just in
let's
case.
not let's not take any risk with Google Translate
So
or anything.
indeed, indeed.
Yeah, I like how you put that honestly because I think it's when you come. I say to people that when you come to a new country, two things happen to you. You need to quickly accept, you need to quickly understand that coming as a tourist and coming as a local are two different things, two different lifestyles. And you need to quickly move from being a tourist to a local, which means
Mhm.
accepting that you don't know. And the best way to know is to ask questions. I mean, it's hard to do. It also took me a while to do to ask. So, what does this mean? Why is this happening like this? Who do I need to speak to for X? But you find out that I don't know if it's same in Netherlands, but here, like in Canada, here, like there's so many things that if you don't ask questions, it's unsaid,
Mhm.
and you can't find any rule book, but it's just an unsaid nuance that you have to. Oh, okay, this is how it's done, and then you do it like that. If you don't do it like that, everyone look at you like, don't you know how to do it? No one's going to tell you how to do it. But if you once you
Yeah.
ask, they'll just tell you how to do it. And
Yeah.
yeah, so I totally I like that approach to moving from your mentality from being a tourist to a local. I want to go back to the first night, but before that, I
Tell
was
me.
going to ask you about what, like, how you talked about you had a community back home in Nigeria. I mean, and I mean colleagues, work, family, all those things. Like, so what sort of community do you have here right now? And do you have one? Have you found one? Is it hard to find one? Because like for us, let me use myself as an example. For us, we moved to a new province because we felt like we had a larger community of people that we knew in Calgary. So we moved from Ottawa to Calgary. So just trying to understand how it is for you all in countries where they don't
Yeah.
speak English like that.
Yeah. So I think for me, the first thing that I will remain forever thankful for is that I joined and I was hired directly from Nigeria into a business. I'm thankful that they had a Nigerian business. And so when I joined, even though I'd never worked in the Nigerian business, that community embraced me. And when I talk
Hmm.
about like arriving on the first day, it was colleagues who knew that this Nigerian was joining the business and was
Mm.
just like, okay, we're going to step up and rally round. So for me, I will forever remain thankful for that. They added me to a WhatsApp group and people just reached out. Like when I got my apartment and I went like the first day to like IKEA to buy the first, like after I screwed my dining table and chairs, I was like, okay, this DIY life is not for me. But just yeah, it's not for me. But just having somebody who went with me, who was able to show me, okay, no, this table, think about this, think about that, think about that, and that community was massive. They still play a huge role in just like knowing that it wasn't just the colleagues, their community, so even their spouses just embraced me, and we still on this till this day kind of have like, okay, barbecues and things, bring the kids and all of that. So for me, that is one thing that I'm very thankful for, the Nigerian colleagues who became a community for me. So I think for me that was a big part of it. And then of course, you being Nigerians, there's also, once you say you're going to the Netherlands, your sister, your brother will say, oh, this person's sister is there. That person, even up to this week, I got a message from someone who said, hi, I'm so and so sister. She said you're in the Netherlands. Let's catch up. So next week we're going to meet up and have coffee and things like that. So I think also just your tentacles from your colleagues who would know somebody and who would say, I remain thankful for that. I had former colleagues who now are here working in different. So you will create, and then your kids will go to school and create their own community. So the WhatsApp group of all the parents where you can also ask questions and things like that. So communities come, and I think I'm very thankful for at least that Nigerian
One.
community from work that were massive. That support. That first day, someone took me to lunch. Someone brought like pepper and food, salt, and all
Oh
those things. Which is why I was
gosh.
saying there's for the first 2 days I really didn't have to go. So when I got my apartment, they came to visit with flowers and things like that. So
Oh.
that was super super helpful. And I think also I then built a community because my first apartment that I got, I moved into like a complex that also had like activities at the start of the month. They would be like, okay, here are the activities for the week. Sign up, either movie dates or Dutch night, or this meet your neighbor games night and things like that. So when it was just me before the kids came in the evening after work, and then also there was lockdown again. That was also so 2021. When I
Mm.
came August, September, it was good, but then the Netherlands went into lockdown in like November, December. So
Yeah,
that
when
was
they had
also
that
tough.
second
We had this, yes,
COVID
the
strain.
second spike, exactly. So that was also helpful to have that, because I was working from home that period until like it was like 3 months, I think, November, December, January, I think February, we only went back to work. So that was also helpful at home to have that community in the evening that people would meet up for things where I lived. So that was also helpful.
Hmm. Yeah. Was that helpful with helping the kids settle down too, or like you think it was just school that helped them settle down?
School helped them settle down. I think that was also another kind of dilemma when we came. It was a trade off. Should we put our kids in the Dutch schooling system, or should we go the international school route, which had, of course, cost implications, but also it meant that, okay, from an assimilation perspective, if
Mm.
my kids were in a Dutch school, I feel like by now their Dutch would have been much more fluent. It's not fluent, but they understand, much better than us. But if they were in a Dutch school, they would have been forced
Yeah.
to do that. But the trade-off was also then, if international school, because the kids come and go so frequently, they adjusted by like their second or third week. It was like, oh, my best friend. I'm just like, I'm sorry, what? So it was English. It's designed to be welcoming to kids, to settle them in as quickly as possible. The parents are used to new people coming, unlike the Dutch schooling system where you don't have that much in and out. So their school is like 100% part of why my kids settled in as quickly as they did. The kids are friendly, they're used to newcomers. It's designed to help you settle in as quickly as possible. And it's multicultural. So it means everybody, there isn't any dominant uh culture or way of doing things. So that was helpful, that the kids, so for my kids, their support system, their community is their school.
Yeah.
And then their school is actually a community, international community school.
Mm.
So that's very helpful for them. They don't really lean on my community.
Okay.
They have theirs from school.
Yeah, I find that how you explained very interesting because I keep thinking about I have a friend who put their kids in French schools when they just came, and I know those kids kind of struggled initially. It was purely French schools, and I can imagine that would be the same when. So yeah, the child
Yes.
will learn the language fast, but also there's also the point where the child is trying to adjust, and
Yes.
we tend to assume that kids love to travel, so nothing's happening to them, but they're dealing with this thing in their own ways, and your goal is, can you make it as easy as possible for them
Yeah.
to settle in, because you don't want a child, especially when if you move a child out when the child is like 8, 9, 10, they've had relationships that you're pulling them out from, things,
Yeah.
routines they understand. We just assume, oh, they're kids, they'll be fine, and
No.
I really wish someday I will be able to talk to a kid, because I really want to understand how kids process the immigration journey, because I feel like they do process it very differently from us. They just don't
Yeah.
have the they just don't verbalize their emotions as we kind of verbalize our emotions, and so we just
Yeah.
assume that everything is fine with them.
I was very intentional when I moved, Dozie, particularly about my kids and being sure that a decision that I made for my career and for myself, that I never ever wanted to look back and feel like they 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 suffered or they were penalized
For
as a
that.
result of something that I did. And it was something that weighed so much on my mind that outside of it, I joined a fantastic multinational that had a lot of things when I arrived in terms of cross-cultural learning, training, temporary housing. I've talked a lot about that. But for me personally, one thing that I felt like I needed some help with was the decision of schooling. So I got and paid for an education consultant, a Dutch education consultant, for 1 hour of like consultancy of what should we do, because there
Mm,
were so many different school of thoughts, and I was like, I need a professional to really really advise us. And I mentioned that when we moved, my son was 11. So we had already in Nigeria, because my recruitment process started in April of 21, and I got the role like in June, and then I moved like in August. So anybody who's familiar with knows that for secondary school, by January, January, February, all the entrance exams are done, right?
mm-hmm.
By March, you've gotten admission. By April, so my son had already gotten into secondary school, into Loyola Jesuit, I can say that.
Jeez.
And we had already paid the school fees for the first year by the time I even started like my first interview. So there was also already this whole, we had made commitments about like his education. And that was also why it was quite easy to say, okay, let him at least go there. We were saying, okay, maybe for the first year, but it ended up being one term. But nonetheless, it was like, this boy has worked so hard to get into here, into this, prestigious school in Nigeria and all that. So when I spoke to the education consultant, one of the things she said to me was, at 11, your child is going to come, that is the last year of primary school in the Dutch system. So your son has already made this shift. I've graduated from primary. I'm now in secondary school. And you're gonna pull him out and put him in the last year of primary, because in the Dutch system, they you turn 12 in your, then you go, it's kind of like the year after. So that was one of the watch outs. Your child is going to go back to primary. So be fully aware of that. And also is going to go into a newcomer class for 1 year. So it's not only the last year of primary, he's going back to a primary school. He's not going to integrate into the class until he's completed his newcomer class. So he will be in a group of people, age group, which means he could, because he's in the last year of primary, he'll definitely be one of the oldest. But they cluster them depending on how many newcomers they have. So this boy is going to go from Loyola Jesuit into primary school again, but the last year, and be in a group where he's the oldest. So it could be a cluster of like 8 to 11-year-olds, and then sit in that with a newcomer and not have the social system. And once that was clear, that was what my son was going to have to deal with for the rest of the year, it was too heavy a price to pay for him. And that was why we then said, listen, you know what, we'll take the trade-off and moving into an international school, because Nigeria's system is very similar to international. So he would
Mm,
be in what we call MYP1 middle years, the first year. So for him, it's like, okay, I'm in GS1, I'm going into MYP1. It makes logical sense for him to just continue. So he's already in secondary and all the things that come with that. So again, that's also something that I would say, besides everything hearsay and all that, when you want to make those kind of big decisions, really, really, really speak to the experts. Find people who are good at what they do, and pay the price. So it was an hour of consultancy where we already briefed. She asked a few questions in the questionnaire, so it was very, very pointed on, do we need to? And when you have an education consultant tell you, to be honest, I'm very worried, and I feel like there are more cons with your older son going to a Dutch school than pros, then of course it makes it very easy for you to make a decision. So that's something that we paid for out of pocket, and I remain thankful that we did that.
Yeah, that's a very very reasoned way to look at it. To be honest, I totally agree. Like the kids don't have to get the short end of the stick because we decide to move to a better place
Move.
or better opportunities, and then the kids
Yeah.
suffer for it. Maybe you say, "Oh, you did it for them." Well, but they're
I was
suffering
fine.
for
I was
it.
happy. I was happy where I was. Why did you move me?
Exactly, exactly. It's such an interesting conversation to have. Let's go back to the first night.
Tell me.
Like, how did that feel? Like, how did that first night feel? I know you already said you had colleagues come and all that, but
Mhm.
again, like, did that really strip away anything? Did it make you feel better? Like, how did that really feel? Like, when all the noise had settled and everyone had
Yeah.
gone away, and it was
Yeah.
just you in your temporary housing. Like, how did it feel?
Yeah. So I moved at the end of August, and it was kind of like this, it's like autumnish. I remember of course, after, because I had two sets of people. There was someone who came, took me to lunch, walked me around, like around the neighborhood to show me, okay, this is where the bus will be, this is where the tram will be, that sort of thing. And then in the evening, another person came again with her husband with like ice cream and food stuff and things like that. So of course, I remember feeling the first overwhelming feeling. I don't like cold, and I am a child of the tropics, true and true. I remember feeling like it's cold. You know, it was kind of the nice antique like boutique hotel and all that, but that meant that it was an older building and there was like draft coming from places where you couldn't really identify, and it was just that feeling of it's cold. And the temperature wouldn't go up past the setting because, of course, it's Europe, and you know how expensive heating is and all that. But I remember that feeling of, I'm so cold. Going to bed like under the blanket with like socks and feeling like I'm cold. And anybody who spoke to me that first month when I was in temporary housing, I couldn't wait to get out of there. It was beautiful and all, but it was so cold. And that was where I swore that, okay, these old buildings are not for me. I want like really locked. Once I control my temperature in there, I want like well insulated. So that's something that it scarred me, because I've now lived in two different buildings since then, and I always go for new housing, because new buildings, because it's just like, nope, I want to close my door and not feel anything coming from anywhere. So yeah, that was my major feeling. It was a week before I started work, so I also didn't feel like, okay, the next day I had work or anything like that. I also gave myself that. So the next day was just more of catching up, setting myself up, unpacking, because this is going to be my home for 1 month. But I distinctly remember feeling it's cold.
So this is probably my last question for you. So, but in all of this, like, when was the first time it really hit you that you weren't home?
Hmm. When was the first time it hit me that I wasn't home? Um, I think it was probably I think it was probably Christmas. It was probably Christmas, because the reason I say that is we have a routine, a family routine for Christmas. And it was Christmas is okay, no. Actually, I'll take a step back. Before that, my immediate older sister turned 40, and I mentioned that I moved in August and it was in October. And I'm typically a very kind of like introverted person. So I feel like that was the first time that a lot of our community, family and friends, because her pictures came out and everybody was like, where is Nkechi? Like on social media, all the pictures, siblings, mom, everybody was like, where's Nkechi? Where's Nkechi? Um, so I think that was maybe the first, because I honestly wanted to go home for her birthday, and I was like, I can't believe my sister is 40 and I'm not there. But I think it was really Christmas. Christmas Day, because we would wake up on Christmas, have this big spread of a breakfast, and we all went to my sister's house for Christmas. And it was that Christmas in the middle of lockdown. We couldn't even go to a restaurant. All the restaurants were closed and all that. And it was just a sort of, I've never been, me, my husband, and my children only closed in a house on Christmas Day. It was kind of like, I was like, video call, when you guys are there, video call me. And it suddenly hit me that, okay, Chris, we now have to, from here on, start building our own traditions of what those sort of like important holidays and all that. What does that mean for us? Suddenly, 31st night, and I was thinking, oh, 31st night, where you go to church and you do all those things. You have your traditions of what you do on New Year's Day. And it was suddenly like, okay, we have to create our own traditions of what will we do on Christmas Day? What will we do on New Year's Day? Yeah, I think for me that was big because it was the first time that I had a Christmas Day and I didn't have my four older siblings, my mom, my dad, nephews and nieces all over. We all always had a potluck Christmas. So that was big for me. And I think it was what made it even more difficult was, even though I had a community here where I could have visited, said, okay, let me go and visit. We were in lockdown in the middle
Yeah.
of a really bad second wave of COVID. So there was nowhere to go. It was just kind of like I cooked food and it was just us, four people shut locked in a house on Christmas Day. I've never had Christmas like that in my entire life. So yeah, it hit me then.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine. But yeah, it's important that one literally, when you move, I think one thing immigrants need to quickly do is start saying to yourself, what are the things or routines or traditions that I used to have back home that I need to start creating new ones that fit the context in which I live right now with
Hmm.
myself or my family or my loved ones? Or else, man, like it can be a really lonely journey sometimes.
Yeah. And it was it didn't realize I didn't think about it, Dozie, in the way that you've said it. I really honestly didn't think about it because especially when you come, there's many hurdles in front of you. You can't really think long term because you have like, I need to find housing, I need to find schooling, I need to find this, I need to move, furnish the apartment, do this. So it's almost like you look 1 week ahead of you in terms of like, okay, what do I need to do within this period? It was only then I was like, okay, what does Christmas look like for us going forward? Do we now want to be traveling to say, okay, every Christmas we'll explore Europe and see another country? What does Christmas look like for us? I didn't think about it until that moment, to be honest. I didn't
Yeah,
think about it.
but yeah, because and it's fair because like every immigrant faces that battle where you just once you get in, it feels like you have a very long to do list that keeps on refreshing. There's always something to do. So
Yeah.
you're always so in the moment, like you're in the moment and in tomorrow. Yes, what I need to do now, what I need to do tomorrow. You're trying to
Yeah.
find a house. You just in that moment. But then every now and then, those hard long term decisions just hit you so hard. Like it literally hits you off your feet. Because like I remember our first Christmas, I was like, yeah, what are we going to do? Okay, we'll go and see the lights. We'll go do this. But it just felt like, oh, like this it's not it.
It's
It's
not
just
it.
not it. And I don't know how it is for you all here. During my first Christmas, it was snowing. Like it was a white Christmas in a way. And so it's way colder here in Canada. So like it's cold.
It's
You're trying
very
to
cold.
adjust to the winter because we came in winter though, but that was like our second winter. So it's trying to adjust to the winter. Not everyone wants to go out. Like
It's
it's
dark at 4 p.m.
yeah,
It's gray.
it's dark. Like like do you go to sleep? Like, but that's not how Christmas is for us. Christmas for us is a massive, big party for 10 days.
Yes.
Like it's a
Yes.
party that starts on the 23rd and ends on the first or the second, and then for
Yeah.
all of a sudden you're just forced to spend those 10 days not knowing what
Indoors.
to do. Like you
Yeah.
start to read a book, the book is not interesting anymore. Like
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. That one. And I yeah. There will be those moments. I think every kind of reminder. I went to Nigeria for the first time since I moved a few months ago in May, and it was just that feeling. I was like, okay. I feel like I need to go to Nigeria every other Christmas. That was my feeling. Even though this was May, I was like, I need this at Christmas, you know? I didn't realize until I went home how much I missed that. And I felt like, okay, going this Christmas might be extreme, like two trips in a year,
Mm,
times four of us. That doesn't really make economic sense. But I was just like, I'm going back in Christmas 24. I immediately, as I was leaving Nigeria, that was the recurring feeling in my head, like, I need this. 1 week is too
yeah,
short. I need 2 weeks. I want to go at
yeah,
Christmas
yeah,
and all that. Yeah. So
yeah. That energy, like I feel like you need to get it every now and then, like just get
yep.
into your body. There's like, oh, I mean, the kids, I don't know, like for my kids, like my kids probably don't understand because like Dodo left when we left, Dodo was 4, so okay, to him, like Nigeria is a distant memory where grandparents live. Ronan is purely is fully Canadian. He was born here, has never been there. But for like me and May, like for as you're older, you that's where
Hmm.
you were born. That's where you
Yeah.
live for at least 30 years of your life. So
Yeah.
it's in your blood, like
My kids were old enough to definitely remember that, and I
mm,
remember especially when we moved, my 8 year old at the time always used to, when they came in December, it was like, I need to video call my friends.
mm,
We did a couple of those video call my friends because as I mentioned, they came like in December and school didn't start until like 2 or 3 weeks. So it was almost always like wake up in the morning, it's just like, can I call my friend? Can I video
yeah.
call and talk to his friend? And he would have 20, 30 minute phone calls like with his friend. So I'll call them mom and send a message, say, okay, Teddy wants to, do this and all that. My older son, maybe not so much. He maybe did a few, Google chat and things with his friend. But definitely when we went back in May, they remember because it was kind of like, what do you want to eat in the morning? They were spoiled, which is not something I was like, okay, enjoy it because you're going back to sandwiches, right? Because here in the Netherlands we have, and that's another thing I forgot to mention, the transition of food.
Mm,
It's very different here. Lunch is at 12 on the dot, like in the office, like 12 on the dot. I remember my first day at work. I thought there was like a fire alarm went off and I missed it because people just were just walking down the corridor like in troops. And I was like, okay, the first group went, the second group, and then I asked my colleague, I was like, what's happening? Where are they all going? It's like, oh, lunchtime. I look 12:02. Lunchtime? I said, yeah, we have to go. Let's go. Lunchtime. 12 o'clock on the dot is lunchtime. And if you go at 1 o'clock, you will be slim pickings because it will be everything good has gone. So officially 12 is lunchtime. And it's most times it's a cold lunch. It's sandwiches, it's salads, it's so that took a lot of like, and I was like, I want a warm meal. And they look at you funny, like a warm meal. Like, why? Why do you want to eat? Is it not too heavy? Because everyone's having a slice of bread and just like something really, really light. So that was also kind of a shift as well.
wow.
So also like with my kids, I have to pack sandwiches like to school because that's what is accepted. Lunch at 12 is a sandwich, fruit and those type of things. So it was
Well,
also
that's interesting.
yes. They only have warm meals for dinner. Yeah, lunch is a typical. I mean, in the office now that okay, it's now a multicultural environment. So there's warm meal options, but most people are having a sandwich, a wrap, a salad, really light.
Yeah, I do think that the European diet is way better than the North American diet. So that's what I think. I mean, they look healthier, but that's another
They
conversation,
they cycle a lot.
right?
They cycle a lot, and I think that that's also another thing that outside of the like the food, the humility that the average Dutch person has is I see very, very senior people at work. Just like, oh, I walk to the office, I cycle to the office. Everyone's parking their bike, and locking it and just it is, there's no like big boss with the SUV
Mm,
or with the mobile police security, and all of that. It's just everyone takes public transport or cycles or those sort of things. So um th- it's because it's accepted and it's normal. It's just
mm.
like, the things that matter in that sort of way, like, oh, I have this type of car or that type of, those things don't really matter here. Everyone just gets up and goes, takes a walk, cycles, or does all of that. So that was also something that took, like, okay, it's totally okay to ride, put my laptop, my backpack, and walk to the office. To this very day, I go to work by public transport. It's just like
Amazing.
take the tram and take whatever. Yeah, so it's everyone just does that. So that's also a different lifestyle.
Awesome. 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 Okay, this has been pretty good, Nkechi. Thank you so much for giving me 50 minutes of your time. And I told you, like, yeah, this was going to take you know, it's going to take a while, and it was going to be interesting. So you see, I
Yes.
said I trust my gut. I trust my gut. Thank you for getting to this point of the podcast. We really do appreciate the fact that you spent your time listening to me interview an immigrant like yourself about, their journey. Please share, follow us on Substack. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcast. We're also on YouTube, so please subscribe on our YouTube channel. And if you know someone who finds it useful, please share with them.